Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the first webinar in Cystic Fibrosis Canada's virtual education series for patients and caregivers, a series of webinars supported by Vertex Pharmaceuticals. The webinar today will be recorded for those who are unable to attend and will be available through YouTube for later viewing. Following the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. Please use the raise your hand feature to be unmuted so that you can ask your question verbally, or alternatively, you can type your question in the chat box. So we're very excited to have Lisa Green with us today to discuss tips for parenting a child with CF. Lisa is a mother of 2 teenagers with CF. She is on the CF Parent Advisory Committee at the Seattle Children's Hospital and also a part of the team for the development of the CF Foundation's newborn screening web pages. Professionally, Lisa is an adjunct professor at Concordia University in the Department of Child and Family Education. She travels around the U.S. and Canada speaking to parents and medical professionals about parenting, medical adherence, transition, and resilience. She is also an author of 3 books on parenting children with health issues, a children's book about making good choices, and consults with CF clinics and other organizations on creating for the CF community. Lisa is a certified family life educator and holds a master's degree in family life education. Her mission is to help families learn practical, easy-to-use tools and skills to deal with the everyday challenges of living with CF. Before we get started with the webinar today, we'd like to run a short poll to get a feel for today's audience. Okay, so it looks like we have a good mix of parents and caregivers on the webinar today. And with regards to the information brochures, I'd like to encourage those of you who are unfamiliar with these to check out the resources section of the CF Canada website to find and download these documents on a variety of topics. I'll now pass over the presentation to Lisa so that she can get started.
Welcome. Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am so grateful to be here, and I'm just so happy to be able to connect with our friends from Canada. I live in the Seattle area, and I love going up to Vancouver and Victoria, BC whenever I can, so I'm really grateful to be here. I'm going to turn off my video camera now because it's distracting to me, and it might be a little distracting to you when I look at my notes. But it is nice for you to see that there's a real person behind the slides, and that would be me. Hi. I'll go ahead and close this out now. Okay. Well, I bet many of you here have been in a situation with your child where you just didn't know what to do. In fact, in my live workshops, I usually ask for a show of hands, and almost every person there has their hands raised. And some people actually have both of their hands raised. And it's really good to know that we're not alone in this challenge. Parenting is really hard, especially when the stakes are so high with cystic fibrosis. In fact, I remember all too well the day that I realized that kids really don't come with an instruction manual, and I needed one desperately. I was really struggling with how to handle with the challenges I was facing with my son Jacob, who was about 2.5 at the time, and it was really tough getting him to take his enzymes before eating. You guys know the routine: open up the little capsule and sprinkle it on the applesauce. Well, one day he hit the spoon and he splattered the enzymes and the applesauce all over the place. And so I spanked him, which was how I was raised way back when. And this triggered a temper tantrum that was a real doozy. There was just nothing I could say or do to calm Jacob down and stop him from hitting, kicking, and screaming. I'll never forget it. He was rolling on the carpet, just having a little fit. Finally, out of desperation, I put him in the shower. I figured if it works for drunks, maybe it would work for him. And it did. And after the initial shock, he settled down. And I learned a very valuable parenting lesson that day. Never try to reason with a drunk or a 2-year-old. But after we had both cooled down, I felt so hopeless. Here were our 2 children, both with a very serious illness, and I realized in that moment that I really had no idea how to parent them. Luckily, I stumbled on a parenting class called Love and Logic, and it changed our lives. Going through this parenting class, I learned how to use choices with Jacob and his enzymes. So instead of saying, Jacob, here, take your medicine, which was how I had done it, here, kind of sticking the spoon in his face, Jacob, here, take your medicine, I learned to say, Jacob, would you like to take your enzymes with the red spoon or the blue spoon? Blue spoon, blue spoon. Jacob, would you like to hold the spoon or mommy hold the spoon? Me hold the spoon, me hold it. You know, those little 2-year-olds, they're all independent and they just want to do it themselves. Jacob, would you like to drink some apple juice or grape juice after your enzymes? Grape, grape, grape. So choices, wow. Choices worked great for little Jacob, and they still work great for big Jacob. Sorry about that. I touched my screen by mistake. And they work big, and they still do work for big Jacob. And I began my journey in learning not only how to be an effective parent, but also how to be a good leader. And that's what we're going to be talking about for a little bit today. We're going to learn what makes a good leader and a good parent. We're going to talk about how do we gain cooperation and motivate our children and teens. And when they don't cooperate, what do we do? And of course, how do we do all of this when we're dealing with medical issues where the stakes and the emotions are so much higher than they are with everyday parenting issues? Next slide. Here we go. Well, I don't have an MD or a PhD, but I do have MOM after my name, and that's my most important job, taking care of our 2 children. And there's a lot to take care of because they both have cystic fibrosis. I know many of you probably recognize many of the medications on this picture. Our son Jacob is 16, and our daughter Casey is 14, and they take a lot of medications every day, including 2 or 3 of them that are inhaled, plus of course, they do chest physical therapy. They do it twice a day. And as you know, this can take up to a couple of hours each day, about an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And it's a lot to manage, isn't it? You folks know exactly what I'm talking about, juggling all those breathing treatments and pills every day. Sometimes I feel like I spend half my day boiling nebulizers. Well, of course, my kids help now too. But then we add in hospital stays and doctor's visits and doctor's appointments and labs. And of course, there's everyday life. There's jobs, there's housework, there's homework, there's sports, there's friendships and fun. We got to have fun. And life can get pretty crazy at times. With all this going on, there are plenty of opportunities for power struggles and communication problems and stress, right? And having good leadership skills will help us to manage all of these areas well, at least better. So let's start out with figuring out what makes a good leader. This is a picture of some of history's well-known leaders from all walks of life, including Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Margaret Thatcher, Mother Teresa, Winston Churchill, and even Bill Gates. And when we describe a good leader, we're thinking of a few things. First of all, we're thinking of their attributes. Let me get my clicker going here. We're thinking of their attributes. We're thinking of their personal qualities. We're thinking of their attributes, which are personal qualities. We're thinking of their attitudes, which are their ways of thinking and feeling about things and how they behave. And then we also think about what good leaders do or what their actions are. And of course, it's interesting to note that we all value different aspects of leadership. If we were together in a room together, we'd have a discussion about it, and I'd have you call out different aspects of leadership that you're drawn to. But since we don't have the ability to do that here, we won't be able to do that. And it's interesting that everyone values different aspects of leaders. People who admire innovation and ingenuity might admire Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. People who value helping the needy and poor might be drawn to Mother Teresa. So different people and different families have different values, and that's perfectly okay. But remember that as our kids grow, some of our values they'll accept, but others, unfortunately, not so much. And this includes the value of good medical adherence or good health. Some teens and young adults may value short-term quality of life, meaning cutting corners with their treatments. They may value that over longevity or good health. And so this is a challenge of leadership. getting everyone working toward a common goal that's in the best interest for everyone in the organization or in the country, or in our case, the family. So we have attributes, we have attitudes, we have action, and we have one more very important thing that makes a good leader, and that's vision. Joel Barker, who's a well-known author, filmmaker, and a leadership guru, said, "Vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time, and vision with action can change the world." Now, while changing the world sounds like an awful lot of work to me, changing our world and our family's world is entirely possible. Of course, you recognize the summit of Mount Everest in this picture. It's fascinating to me that these people choose to climb a mountain so high that they can't breathe without help, and many never make it home. 4,000 people have attempted to climb Mount Everest, 660 have done it, and 142 have died trying. And I think there's some good metaphors for life with CF here. Passion, hard work, vision, and hope are what it takes to climb a mountain and to live well with cystic fibrosis. In fact, George Washington Carver said, "Where there is no vision, there is no hope." I'm having a problem with my clicker. All right. In past generations with cystic fibrosis, hope was hard to come by. In the 1950s, few people with CF lived to go to elementary school. In 1985, the median age of survival was about 25 years. In 2002, it was 31. And in 2012, in the United States, these are U.S. numbers, we passed a new milestone at 41 years, which is about where we're at today. And for Canada, the median age of survival is around 49 years of age. Promising new drugs may bring us to a normal life expectancy. In the U.S., close to half of all people with CF are now ages 18 and older, and in Canada, 60% are adults. So no longer do we parents and professionals need to focus strictly on keeping our kids alive or just trying to keep them comfortable and happy, which was how it was a generation ago. Now we can all focus on living longer, productive, meaningful lives with cystic fibrosis. As parents, families, medical providers, and people with CF, our hope and our vision have changed, and leadership is now a critical part of managing life with cystic fibrosis. Whether we're a CEO, a manager, a teacher, a doctor, or a parent, leadership is leadership, and many of the very same skills that work as leaders in businesses also work with our families, because it's all about using good communication skills. In fact, I had a Microsoft manager tell me that she won a very prestigious award out of thousands of other managers because of what she learned in one of my early childhood parenting classes. And if we stop to think about it, if we can be successful with a toddler or a teenager, we can be successful with just about anyone. Here's an interesting fact for you. Business organizational theory, which is what is taught in business schools, is based on the early research in family systems theory. Groups of people function in similar ways whether they work together or live together, but we can't fire our kids, nor can they just quit if they aren't happy with the boss. So that's one aspect that makes parenting more difficult. And when we're dealing with a chronic illness like CF, this makes good leadership and parenting even more difficult and more critical because the stakes are so high. It's pretty easy to be a good leader when times are good. When the economy and the sales are good, the CEO can kind of just roll along and enjoy life. It's when times are hard that good and bad leadership becomes clear. When the troops are unhappy and stressed out, that's when it's hard. And it's no different with families. So how we handle hard times and stress is a hallmark of good leaders and good parents. And it matters. It matters a lot. Research shows that families have a very powerful influence on the physical health of family members. Lifestyles and habits we have as families certainly affect health. Things like smoking, what we eat, how we exercise, the viruses we pick up and share. These are all obvious risk factors. But the emotional environment and family interactions also have a profound effect. Children who experience high family stress have been shown to be at a higher risk for infections and hospitalization. That's important for us to know. In 1993, Patterson and her team demonstrated that family variables predicted the rate of decline of pulmonary function over a 10-year period in kids with CF. I'm going to say that again. Family variables predicted the rate of decline of pulmonary function over a 10-year period in kids with CF. Other studies show that emotional support, or a lack of it, is a strong predictor of how well people with chronic illnesses will do and even how long they will live. So this tells us that the quality of our family relationships is very important. In fact, Dr. Thomas Campbell, and the citation is at the bottom of my slide here, he's an MD trained at Harvard. He says that family psychoeducation may actually be able to extend the lives of those who suffer from CF. I about fell out of my chair when I read that when I was doing the research for this workshop. Because I realize that there's so much about life that I don't have control over. There's so much about CF that I don't have control over. But I realize that I do have control over the emotional environment in my home. So what is psychoeducation? It's training that addresses family relationships and teaches problem solving and coping skills, which is what you'll be learning a little bit about today. If you've ever been to a marriage class, that's an example of psychoeducation. And of course, parenting classes are also examples of psychoeducation. So let's jump right into the big parenting and leadership and family problem, which is you just can't make people do what you want them to do if they don't want to do it. Whether we're talking about chores or spending money or medical adherence or picking up dirty socks, the old saying is true. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And you can hand a pill to a patient, but you can't make him take it, just like my little Jacob with his enzymes. So even though we have great new medications and medical technology, it just doesn't help when a person doesn't do it. So let's talk about medical adherence for a moment. Good medical adherence is critical for our kids, and it's very dependent on leadership. The rate of medical adherence in general is around 50 to 75% for adults, much less for kids. This is clearly a big issue both for parents and for doctors. And ultimately, it comes down to the question, how do we motivate people to make good choices? Of course, as parents, we want to raise kids who make good choices about grades, friends, alcohol, driving habits, the way they treat other people, including us, and for you and me, medical adherence. The problem is that we can't force it from the outside. It has to come from inside the kid. They have to want to do it. This is called intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation. But as parents and teachers and doctors, we tend to rely on motivation from the outside. We try to force them to change. I suspect that many of you here have recently used demands and commands with your kids. And lectures. Boy, are we good at that. How about nagging and reminding? What about bribes and guilt trips? And if this is you, don't beat yourself up. This is so natural. Most of us learn these things from our parents, who learned it from their parents. And it might have worked out well for them, but times have changed. With today's kids, the more we do these things, the less effective we become in the long run. See, this is the key, you guys. Carrots and sticks, or bribes and punishments, often work really well in the short run. With younger kids, we can make them take their medications or do their homework if we threaten or bribe them enough. I mean, what 10-year-old kid doesn't respond to this? You either take your medication right now or I'm cutting off your video games, right? The kid is going to do it. Or if we say, oh, if you do your treatments, I'll buy you a new toy, I'll buy you a new video game, right? The kid is going to do it. But what happens in the long run, like when our kids are teenagers and young adults? We no longer have that kind of power over them. With a little kid, I can pick him up and move him to his bedroom or his timeout chair, but I sure can't do that with my 16-year-old son. He towers over me. And this is the challenge that many parents have when their kids become teenagers. They find that their power no longer works. So we need to get away from the short-sighted approach that is really typical of many parents. When I ask parents what they want to learn in a parenting class, the common responses are, how do I get my child to listen the first time? How to get my child to do what I say? And of course, while gaining cooperation in the moment is important, it's only half the story. We also need to be thinking about how our responses are going to affect our children next week, next year, and 10 years down the road. So this means asking ourselves some long-term questions like, how do I help my child feel capable? How do I help my child feel belonging and significance and connected? How do I help my child learn respect and cooperation and problem-solving skills? And how do I empower my child to be a good decision maker, to be someone who makes good choices? You see, our ultimate job, our bottom line job as parents, is to prepare our kids for the real world. At some point, our kids are going to be heading out into the great big world of college and work and marriage, and we're not going to be going with them. Believe it or not, we won't be going with them. So the very best thing that we can do for our children is to help them learn how to make good choices on their own without us. The big question is how. Let's start at the beginning. Early in a child's life, a parent's love is shown through protection. Parents make all the decisions about what to eat and when to go to sleep, what clothes to wear, and all the decisions about taking medications, time to do your treatments, time to take your medicine, right? Basically, we parents control every aspect of our young child's life, and we have to keep them healthy, to keep them safe. If we don't, they're at risk. They're at risk of getting hurt or getting sick, or even at risk of death, like running out into the road or eating chemicals from under the sink or poisonous houseplants. But as our child grows, we must make a transition to allow them to make decisions to solve their own problems and to take care of themselves, hopefully taking care of themselves well. And it's in this gray area that many of us blow it because we really don't know when and how to start letting go. It's a challenge for every parent, but especially when a child has an illness with CF. So again, how do we get from here to there? And just a moment about the pictures. The top one is when Jacob was born with meconium ileus, and this is a picture of him in the NICU. And then this is a picture of Jacob, and he's about 14 or 15 here, this is about a year ago. And you can see that he's actually learning how to push his own home IVs through his line with my careful monitoring, of course. So how do we get from here, where we're taking care of this little baby, to there, where we have a self-sufficient young adult who's making good choices? If I ask you to think about a time in your life when you said, I sure learned from that lesson, you're probably thinking about a time that you made a mistake. We learn some of life's biggest lessons by making mistakes, or what we call experience. Experience is one of life's best teachers. In fact, Love and Logic says, the road to wisdom is paved with affordable mistakes and consequences. But how many of us here do our best to keep our kids from making mistakes? Or we try to protect them from the consequences of their mistakes. And again, this is natural. We love our kids. We don't want to see our kids hurt. We don't want to see our kids suffer. In fact, we might even feel like it's our job as a good parent to make sure that our kids don't make mistakes. Our schools and our relatives and even our doctors might tell us that we need to make sure that our kids don't make mistakes. The problem is that this is a major parenting mistake, because every time we do this, we may be robbing our child of one of their life's most important lessons for them in that moment. And it's one of those ironies of life that parents who allow their kids to make more mistakes actually end up with kids who make fewer mistakes in the long run. Now, the key is knowing which mistakes to allow and how to respond when they happen. Story. Jacob was about 5 or 6 years old. His room was messy, and we'd had some conversations about that. I'm guessing that many of you here can relate. So one morning, Jacob got out of bed and he stepped on a plastic dragon with big wings. One of the wings snapped and broke in half and cut his foot, cut it pretty bad. He didn't need stitches, but it was nasty. Now, a normal response to this situation is, of course, as a parent, to say, what? If we were together, I know you'd say all at one time, I told you so. Now, this is me without love and logic. Now, Jacob, didn't I tell you last night to clean up your room? See, if you just listen to me. Now, this kind of thing just makes me so mad. Now, Jacob, you're not going to be able to go do your swim lessons until that cut heals, and I just wasted my money because I just paid for those swim lessons 3 days ago. Jacob. Now, is Jacob saying, wow, Mom, you're right. I'm going to have to listen to you more often. Yeah, right, in my dreams. What do our kids hear when we give a lecture? Wah, 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 right? Or some kids, like my son, get defensive. Well, I did clean my room, but the dragon fell off the table and blah, 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 right? Our strong-willed kiddos can learn to argue with us at a very young age, and what we don't realize is that we're the ones who are teaching them. Do you have a kid who likes to argue? Do you want to learn what to do about it? Memorize a one-liner like, I know, but I don't want to do my therapy. I know. I hate this. It stinks. I know, honey, it is hard, but other kids don't have to do it. I know. I hate CF. I know, honey, it is hard. How long can we keep this up? Doesn't take a lot of mental energy. Or we can ask a question. One day Jacob said, why do I have to do my breathing treatments? I hate doing it. And I said, oh, honey, that is frustrating, using some empathy. And then I said, and what did the doctor say? To do them every day. Right. So will you be doing them now or in 10 minutes? Choices. I don't want to do them. I understand. Well, then let's call the doctor and the two of you can discuss it. He's thinking. Never mind. And I heard the nebulizer start up about 5 minutes later. So if a kid just needs to be heard, and we all need to be heard sometimes, this should do the trick. The key is to validate the feelings but not get sucked into the content of the complaint, and then ask a question that helps him think it through. And if your kid just wants to continue to whine, argue, and complain, then we can use a love and logic one-liner like, I know, or what did I say, or nice try, or my favorite is, I love you too much to argue. Jacob, I love you too much to argue about this. And then I just walk away. Okay? So there's some tips for you. So back to my dragon story. When our kids blow it, instead of anger, lectures, and I told you so's, love and logic teaches us to give a heavy dose of empathy and let the consequences or experience do the teaching. And you can see the E's on the screen here. I'm working with the E's. So when Jacob cut his foot, I said, oh, honey, what a bummer. I bet that hurts. Ouch, let's get you cleaned up. And I loved him up, and I bandaged his foot. And to this day, Jacob keeps his floor very clean. And he remembers this experience. Jacob learned from the natural consequences of his mistake. So natural consequences or experiences are the best teacher. As long as we don't get mad or lecture, but with empathy, our kids learn from the experience and are more likely to see us as the good guy rather than as the mean, evil punisher or someone to argue with. With empathy and consequences, our kids are learning the important life lesson of cause and effect. They're learning that their actions have consequences. This is how we raise kids who make good choices. This is also how we raise kids who are resilient and who learn that they can handle the hard times in life. Now, can we agree that we do not allow our kids to experience the consequences of life-threatening mistakes? If a child needs clotting factor or insulin or, in our case, antibiotics, we provide them. We set rules and limits. We educate them about what could happen. And if they blow it, we do not allow them to suffer the consequences. Instead, we use what we call imposed logical consequences. Here's another story. As you know, our kids need enzymes before they eat. We've always been very firm about not skipping enzymes. We set that limit with our kids. We don't skip enzymes. And our kids, since about age 10 or 11, have been responsible for having their enzymes with them when we go out. And they are very responsible most of the time. We've had lots of discussions about how they can carry them, how they can remind themselves to fill up their enzyme baggies. But they were starting to get a little relaxed about this and relying on my mommy purse supply. So I decided not to carry their enzymes with them anymore, and I told them that. I informed them that I would no longer have a purse supply. And one day they wanted to go to Wendy's after school for a snack, and I said, oh, sure, let's do it. And of course they always want to go to Wendy's for a snack, and we can't always afford it. But this week it was okay, and I said, okay, good, let's go. And they were so excited. So we got into the drive-thru, and I asked them, okay, does everybody have their enzymes ready? Silence. They looked at each other. Uh-oh. They tore the car apart. They tore their backpacks apart, looking for enzymes, but they didn't have any enzymes. Mom, do you have any enzymes? No, I don't have any enzymes. Where's the enzymes? Where's the enzymes? No enzymes. Luckily, there was no one behind me in the drive-thru, and I backed up and we went home without a snack. And they were mad, and I felt bad, but I knew that this was an important lesson for them both. In fact, when they argued with me, I said, wow, guys, it's really sad that we can't go to Wendy's, but I refuse to contribute to your gastrointestinal difficulties. And I just didn't argue. That was it. And since that day, they've both done a lot better at remembering to have enzymes with them at all times. Now, no amount of lecturing, nagging, or reminding would have taught that same lesson. And of course, we give our kids another chance to be successful. This tells them that I trust them to learn from their mistakes. There's that encouragement, and we show high expectations. So I took them back to Wendy's a couple of days later, and before I could even ask, they were going, we got them, we got the enzymes, we have enzymes. So that is how our kids learn, from the inside out. Now, before learning love and logic, I would have not responded this way. I would get caught up in the rant, rave, rescue, reminding, and reprimanding cycle. And let's make this clear. I am far from perfect. My kids will tell you that I am far from perfect. It is so easy to fall into ranting, raving, reminding, rescuing. But with awareness and practice, I'm getting much better at being what researchers call an authoritative parent. Let's start with what authoritative parents are not. And I know this is a busy slide, but bear with me. They are not permissive. And I'm using the classic model by Diana Baumrand. Her name is at the top of the screen if you want to Google it later. And I'm using her model to teach you parenting styles because this has the best research basis. And there's a lot of versions online, but this has the best research basis. So permissive parents, sometimes referred to as indulgent parents, make very few demands of their kids. These parents rarely discipline their children because they have low expectations. According to Diana Baumrand, permissive parents are non-traditional, they're lenient, they do not require mature behavior, and they allow considerable self-regulation, meaning that they allow their kids to kind of figure it out and regulate themselves instead of having the parents' guidance. And permissive parents have a hard time with confrontation. They tend to avoid confrontation at all costs. Now, permissive parents aren't all bad. They're responsive, they're warm, they're nurturing, and they communicate well with their children. They often become more of a friend than a parent. And they tend to rescue their kids, and they don't empower accountability. And so the problem is that this parenting style, as you can see on the screen, can result in some problems when kids grow up. Here's that long-term point of view again, including lack of self-control, rebellion, defiance, the inability to persist with challenging tasks like medical tasks, antisocial behavior, and entitlement. Entitlement's a really big problem with our kids with CF. They can also have problems with authority figures, which includes doctors. And these kids can have problems sticking with medical routines and staying adherent when they get older. Here's another click. Okay. The next style, which is authoritarian parenting, not to be confused with authoritative parenting, which is what I'll talk about in a moment. Children are expected to follow rules, strict rules. Failure to follow the rules usually results in punishment. These parents have high demands, but they're not responsive to their children. And according to Diana Baumrand, these parents are obedient and status-oriented, and they expect their orders to be obeyed without explanation. Now, having rules, limits, and boundaries is certainly important, but when we lean too far in this direction, oftentimes out of frustration, our kids are at increased risk of becoming anxious, withdrawn, and unhappy. They can have poor reactions to frustration. Girls are more likely to give up, and boys are more likely to become hostile. And these kids are also more likely to be rebellious in the teen years. And again, it's not all bad news. These kids, according to the research, do well in school, and they're not likely to engage in antisocial activities like substance abuse, vandalism, and gangs. They also may be more likely to adhere to medical requirements. There's some interesting research about this that's fairly recent, unless, of course, they get rebellious. And this parenting style is particularly prone to rebellion, and we call this the drill sergeant parenting style. And on the next little corner on the bottom left-hand slide, or corner of your screen, an uninvolved parenting style has low demands, few demands, low responsiveness, and little communication. And while these parents might fulfill a child's basic needs, they're generally detached from their child's life. And this can happen in families where the parents are so overwhelmed by the problems that they face with CF that they basically just give up and they check out. I've seen this happen in families that have a lot of kids. Not all families, of course, but I've seen it happen where they have a lot of kids, maybe the youngest one has CF, and the parents are just so overwhelmed that they don't mean to be uninvolved, that it just happens. And this style can result in lifelong challenges for the child, including low self-esteem, depression, acting out, and anxiety. And the last parenting style, which is the authoritative or democratic parenting style, is kind of like what Goldilocks said in the story of the three bears. This one is just right. Like authoritarian parents, democratic parents establish clear rules and guidelines that their kids are expected to follow. However, this style is collaborative. The rules are discussed, they're explained. It's not just blind obedience. They set as many rules as necessary, but as few as possible. Children are given choices, and they have an appropriate degree of autonomy and decision-making. They have low psychological control, meaning that kids can have their own opinions and feelings about things even if they don't reflect the parents' opinions and feelings about things. That's important. Children are respected but not quite equal in the family decision-making. The parents are still in charge, but they use their power wisely and kindly, just like any leader we would hope for, whether it's a leader in our place of work or a leader of our country. Authoritative parents are responsive to their children. They're willing to listen to questions. When kids fail to meet the expectations, these parents are more nurturing and forgiving rather than punishing. However, they do hold their children accountable, and that's where using empathy before consequences comes in, like I've sort of modeled with those two stories for you. Diana Baumrand suggests that these parents monitor and impart clear standards for their children's conduct. They're assertive, but they're not intrusive and restrictive. Their disciplinary methods are supportive rather than punitive. They want their children to be assertive as well as socially responsible and self-regulated as well as cooperative. And according to decades of research, this parenting style increases the odds of kids being more self-confident, happy, responsible, hopeful, and resilient. So this is what we strive for as parents. And the good news is that we can learn to be a democratic parent. Most research-based parenting classes will teach you the skills to be democratic parents. I'm sure you can find local classes, which would be excellent. I've also written a book about this, which I'll tell you about at the end. And I also teach a 6-session teleclass, which is kind of like this, for CF parents every January, and parents come from around the world. And you can visit www.winningwithcf.com for information about that class if you'd like to attend. So here are some final tips for increasing the odds for success with our kids with CF. One of the most important foundations of parenting is that kids take good care of themselves. Now, I know that taking good care of yourself is probably one of the most difficult things. It sure is for me, but it's so important. Our tendency, especially us moms, is to revolve around our child's needs. And of course, we tend to meet those needs. We need to meet those needs. But we must also take care of ourselves, or we're going to get stressed out and even burnt out. Then we aren't as capable of thinking about the long term, or we're not as capable of staying calm when our kids are acting up. When our bucket is empty, we have nothing left to give. So we need to make sure that our own needs are just as important as everyone else's in the families. And this is important not just for you, but for the kids too. Because remember our E's. You are their example. And if we don't model taking good care of ourselves, then our kids will be a lot less likely to take good care of themselves too. So we need to make sure that we're eating right, we're exercising, we're getting enough sleep, and we're taking our medications. We also need to make sure that we're setting limits around the way that our kids treat us. We don't tolerate disrespect and nasty behavior from our kids, even when they're sick. We don't do our kids any favors when we don't hold them accountable for their behavior. Another important part of taking good care of ourselves is understanding and managing our emotions. Our emotions play a big role in setting an example in how we come through to our kids. Of course, the big ones are grief, guilt, fear, and frustration. And if you're struggling with any of these, please talk to your CF team or a counselor. They can really help. And we're doing our kids a really big favor when we're in a good, healthy place ourselves. I have more writings on my website, tipsforcfparents.com, about understanding the emotions of CF, including a wonderful little self-guided course about how to handle stress. And the practice of mindfulness, there's been a lot of research about the practice of mindfulness, can really help with all of these things: grief, depression, fear, anxiety, frustration, and stress. So on to my next tip. We need to learn and use effective communication tools, including listening, empathy, problem solving, discussing tough issues, and tools for gaining cooperation, which includes setting limits properly. Communication is absolutely critical to good leadership. In fact, I read a quote somewhere that said, "Communication is the language of leadership." All of these areas are skills that can easily be learned. That's what people learn in business school, hopefully, right? And I've provided a handout for you all, which will help you to learn some of these skills. And they're going to be posted on the CF Canada website along with the video link. I don't have time to teach you all these things in this short little course, so I provided a handout which will help you learn some of these things. Next point is to make sure that we're sharing control. It's so important to share control with our kids with choices and alternatives instead of giving demands and commands. Choices is a great way to share control. They help us to avoid power struggles and still set limits. They're an excellent way to share control with our kids in ways that please both parent and child. And here's an example of how we can word our choices. Are you going to do your nebulizer before breakfast or after breakfast? Would you like to take your medicine with juice or milk? Do you plan to have your blood tested tomorrow or Friday? Choices, 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 like I shared in my initial story with my little Jacob and his enzymes. Choices around when they do their breathing treatments. What would you like to watch while you do your breathing treatments? Or would you like to play a video game? Would you like to start your breathing treatments now or in 5 minutes? Would you like to do your CPT with an acapella, or would you rather do pat-paps? Choices, choices, choices. Lots of little choices. And successful parents set firm limits and follow through with action or logical consequences instead of nagging, threatening, lecturing, ranting, raving, reminding, and rescuing, like the story about Wendy's that I shared with you earlier. I've got lots of writings about this as well. Lots of examples, lots of stories. And last but definitely not least, have a vision for your child and family. Focus on hope. There's so much hope. And when we're hopeful, our children are more likely to be hopeful too. And with CF, there is so much hope for the future. We've come so far, and we have amazing people to help light the way and to give us encouragement when we're having a hard time. Take Elizabeth Nash, for example. Those are the pictures at the top of your screen. As the captain of her college ski team, she refused to quit, even when she needed to use oxygen. She just skied with a backpack filled with portable oxygen tanks. And because she was so inspiring, Elizabeth was selected to carry the 2002 Olympic torch through Union Square in San Francisco. Now, I'm sad to say that Liz died at nearly 33, well past her statistical average at the time, but she taught us that it's not how long you live that matters, it's how you live. Her parents were told that she wouldn't make it through elementary school, and so she lived a long, long time and really had an amazing attitude. And, of course, your Canada's Lisa Bentley, she is amazing. She has 20 Ironman titles under her belt and is incredibly inspiring. And she teaches all of us that CF does not have to stop us from living life to the full. Another way of focusing on the hope is to talk about the current medical research. When I read good news about CF, I share it with the kids. We talk about how medical adherence is going to increase the odds of longevity and quality of life. We have fun together. We enjoy life. Don't let CF limit you. Just get creative about how you can be adherent and enjoy life at the same time. Send your kids to summer camp. Encourage them to play sports, go on vacations as a family, go camping, explore. Invest in portable nebulizer pumps and disposable nebulizers. Our kids need to see that life can be fun even when CF gets really hard. One family I know continued to take their sons, both of them with CF, on vacations and out boating in the San Juan Islands, even in end stage. They brought oxygen tanks with them, and they got creative about what they could do. And, of course, if you're spiritual, you can talk about your faith. My kids have always loved hearing stories about people who have died and come back and what happened to them. This gives them hope that this is not the end of the story. And there's a lot of research about how faith helps people cope. Stay in the present, today. Don't worry about tomorrow. I know it's hard, but we'll just work ourselves into a frenzy if we worry about what tomorrow may bring. Alice Morse Earle, a writer in the late 1800s and early 1900s, said this: "The clock is running. Make the most of today. Time waits for no man. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present." And I have to say that over the years, my kids have had a lot of fun dreaming about their wishes. They wanted to meet Barney, then it was Hannah Montana and Justin Bieber. We encouraged them to wait until they'd be at least old enough to remember it. And we've had years of dreams, and finally they had their wishes granted by Kids Wish Network. We all got to meet the cast and crew of NCIS for Casey's Wish, and Jacob got to attend a Seattle Seahawks training camp to meet all the players, including Beast Mode, Marshawn Lynch. That's what's pictured here. Plus, we got to be on the field for a game where Jacob's wish got really good with the Seattle Seagulls. And as I end here, this slide really gives me hope, and I want to share it with you. As I travel around the U.S. and Canada and talk to people and attend medical conferences, I really want to encourage you with what I see. There are so many really smart people that have totally dedicated their lives to helping our kids live better. The average IQ in any of these conferences is about a bazillion. And they're there to help us. They're learning new things. They're focusing on the most current research. This is a time of real hope. And I hope this material also gives you hope. Dare to dream. Encourage your children to dream. Plan for their futures. Save for college and braces and weddings. Remember the power of vision. Here are my websites. If you're interested in our books or other resources, you can get them at Love and Logic. This one, Parenting Children with Health Issues, is available at loveandlogic.com. This one, No More No, How to Gain Cooperation with Medical Adherence, is available on Amazon. That's the only one that's available on Amazon. Everything else is available at Love and Logic. Here is my contact information and my websites, which are just for parents of kids with CF. I've written so many resources and have created so many resources for you, including many stories about how to use these tools. If you're an adult with CF and a parent, you'll also find many of the resources applicable to you too. I don't know if there are any adults with CF that might be attending. And of course, my winningwithcf.com website is the one to go to find out information about that teleclass. I should have added that there for you. And if you have any questions or you're struggling with applying the tools that I've taught you, send me a note, call me, connect with me. I'd love to talk with you and help you work through the challenges. And before my final words, I'd of course like to thank our sponsors. In this case, it's Vertex. Our healthcare professionals, of course, Cystic Fibrosis Canada, thank you so much for inviting me. And I want to thank every one of you. We all contribute to the CF community in our own special way. We raise money, giving support, participating in research. This is what I do to give back. It takes all of us together to make a difference in CF. And before I end here, and we're going to jump into questions, I want to leave you with these thoughts. Raising a child with any medical condition is not easy. There are hard times, times that we feel like giving up, times when hope is hard to find. And when I find myself in that dark place, I try to think about others who have gone before me, others who have struggled and triumphed over their challenges, resilient families and people, like Helen Keller. She became deaf and blind at 19 months of age due to illness. She became like a wild animal. She couldn't see, she couldn't hear, she missed her developmental milestones. Many people gave up on her. They told her mother to put her into an institution because that's what they did back then. They just lock them up and throw away the key. But her parents refused to give up. And they met a man named Alexander Graham Bell who encouraged them to keep fighting for their daughter. And the story of how a teacher named Anne Sullivan brought light to Helen's world of darkness has inspired generations. So keep on loving and keep on hoping, because truly, hope sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And it's time for questions.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So if anybody has any questions, you can either use the raised hand feature again, and I can unmute you, and then you can ask your question directly, or you can use the Q&A feature on the right-hand side and type in your questions, and I can read them out loud. That's the question.
Yep, so Ian, I see you've raised your hand here.
Hi, it's Ian.
Do we want to... Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, thanks very much, Lisa. That was very interesting. Excellent talk. I'm just wondering if you could speak about, just briefly, about your own children's experiences transitioning from pediatric to adult care. Are they there yet, and what kind of preparations were required for that?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. I could talk all day about transition. Now, my children are 14 and 16, so they are not yet transitioned into the adult system.
Right.
But I've done a bunch of studying about it, and you know what? I have to be honest. I will, like any normal parent, because I am a normal parent, will be worried and concerned and scared. But you know what? I feel really good about their readiness. Both of my kids at 14 and 16, they're not perfect either. So let's just get this clear. No one's perfect, right? But both of my kids have been managing their own medical routine for a long time, and they're really good at it. And, you know, we have shifted the responsibility in little steps. I like to say that transition starts as soon as your kids are old enough to spit peas across the table. And transition is really about teaching children to take responsibility. That's really the nuts and bolts of having a successful transition. And here's the thing is that you need to know is that if a kid is responsible with their homework and taking care of their toys or their iPads and iPods, and you know, if a kid is responsible, you know, across the board, then you're probably not going to have a lot of problems with transition. because responsibility is responsibility. It's just a matter of teaching them the medical tasks, just like they learn how to get their clothes ready in the morning and get ready for school on their own and get themselves put to bed on time, on their own without us nagging them. On the other hand, if we have a basically irresponsible kid, then that's where we start to have a challenge with transition. And so the key is to start early. And the key is to start in the way that I've kind of taught you here, with using choices and questions and teaching and, allowing consequences, affordable consequences to occur so that they learn that the decisions they make affects them the most. And when we're using kind of this approach throughout the developmental years of our children, they are much more likely to be very responsible in the teen years because they know that, their choices matter. Bad things happen when they make bad choices. They get that at a really deep level. And of course, there's going to be some nuts and bolts. I have some really good resources for you. In fact, I just prepared some slides for another workshop that I'm going to be doing about transition. And it gives you some really nice little benchmarks about things that you should be doing to prepare your child for transition. I also have a lot of resources on my website under tipsforcfparents.com. If you scroll down to about the middle of the screen, you'll see a little link that says transition. And if you click on that link, I have written extensively about transition, including providing transition plans that tell you what you should be shifting and preparing for at each stage of your child's life with cystic fibrosis. I hope that covers it.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We did also get some questions into the Q&A box. The first is, what would you say the hardest obstacle was going into teen years with your kids related to cystic fibrosis?
I would say, and this is an ongoing struggle for me, is and it's crazy because I really do trust my kids, but really trusting them. It's letting go. It's so hard to. My kids do, both of them, and I'm really not, and I'm proud of them, but they do a really amazing job. I know that I could die tomorrow, heaven forbid, and they would be fine. They would miss me. Of course, I would want them to miss me, but I know they would be fine. They would know how to take care of me. They wouldn't stop taking good care of themselves, or they wouldn't fall apart because I'm not here. And that's, I think, for me has been the hardest thing, is actually really trusting that they do take good care of themselves and they do make good decisions. Because, with teenagers, we do need to monitor them, and that's an important thing to do. Sometimes parents don't monitor closely enough, or we monitor too closely. And it depends on the kid. Some kids need to be monitored really closely. My kids don't really need to be monitored that closely. And so I have a hard time kind of letting go of that control. It's control. Our kids have needs for control. We have just repeatedly, these are good kids. They make good choices. They know what they need to do. Don't nag them. Don't nag at them. Don't, just kind of let it go. Let it go. They're doing a great job. I would say for me, that's the hardest thing. For another parent, it may be different.
Thank you, Lisa. There are a few more questions, so hopefully we can get to these quickly. One is, what types of recreational activities are most beneficial for CF children? And an example they gave is horseback riding.
Yeah, I would say anything your kid loves. Anything that your child loves to do that your doctor doesn't prohibit. And I would never want to go against any kind of doctor's orders. We have found over the years that our kids have not been limited Pretty much the only thing our doctors have limited are things like going in a cave, like cave spelunking. Believe it or not, my son actually asked about that. My doctor actually had to say, what is spelunking? Caves? No caves, which is kind of a no-brainer because nasty things live in caves, but it was through Boy Scouts. So my son, and I can share with you what my kids have done. My son is an Eagle Scout for Boy Scouts. So he's done, all kinds of crazy camping over the years. We've done camping as a family. We just stay away from, we stay away from smoke as best we can. Obviously, campfires are a part of camping, and we try to avoid that. But camping, so Eagle Scouts, so lots of activities with Eagle Scouts. He's done basketball. He's done wrestling. He's doing field and track right now. He tried soccer when he was younger. He didn't like it so much. Tried football when he was younger. He got beat up too much, so that didn't work out. And I guess I can't say from my mom's heart that I was sorry about it. Baseball he tried. It was a little slow for him. So, and then our kids have done, my daughter does volleyball. She's done basketball. She tried season soccer for a little while. Did a little cheerleading, dance kind of stuff. And we've really encouraged our kids from early on because we were encouraged by our CF teams as well as other wonderful role models who had kids with CF that said to me early on, do not limit your child's life. The psychosocial environment is more important than the physical. And actually there's some interesting research about that. If you email me, I can dig it out and find it. And that phrase was actually used, that the psychosocial has a bigger impact on quality of life than lung function. So we've always really just empowered our kids to just, live fully, live freely, but of course taking good care of themselves. And so the limit that we place is, and you have to take good care of yourself. So, you've got to get your treatments in. You're not going to do something like that the doctor says, no, that's clearly risky, like i.e. cave spelunking, or scuba diving is another one. I think that's a no-no. But anyway, those few things that are really off limits, but we've really encouraged them to live fully and do what they love. My daughter has done horseback riding. I would not have her muck out stables because of the aspergillus concern, but she's loved riding horses. She doesn't hang out with horses in stables, but she has done horseback riding. So that's my my reply to the matter.
Great, thank you. The
You're
next
welcome.
one is I have a 6-month-old with CF. Any tips on how to establish physio/breathing exercises or routines for a baby?
I do, yeah. It's wonderful that you're starting early. And I actually have a lot of writing about this on my tipsforcfparents.com website under, if you kind of scroll down, look into the section that says infants and toddlers, I think. But yeah, so the key is to establish those routines. You're wanting to get into a routine, and you want to establish those routines around times of day that aren't a problem. So, once your child gets on a routine for eating and sleeping, you'll kind of have to pick out a time that works, because what you don't want them to do is, at some point they will fight you. That's just a given. All kids will fight it at some point. I guess any kid worth their salt anyway, I say. We want our kids to be strong-willed, because if they're strong-willed, that means they're a fighter. The problem is we just don't want them to fight us. But some things that you might want to do with the physio, you might want to make sure that the environment is calm, that the room isn't too hot or the room isn't too cold, and you want to make sure that the environment is just really relaxed. And so much about the physio is that if you make it fun and you're happy and you're excited when you do it, then your baby's going to pick up on those vibes, and they're going to be happy and they're going to be excited too. Of course, until they get to become 2 and they learn the word no, then they won't be so excited anymore. But again, younger children, they actually they mirror our emotions. They almost exactly. So the key is to be really happy and excited and joyful when they do things right, and then to just be not angry or frustrated when they do things wrong, but just to be calm and like a poker face. And so sometimes it's a little hard to muster when we're frustrated, but it's something that, I actually practice in the mirror as a poker face. And so give lots of energy and excitement when they do things right. to try to get them to do, that physio. And then when they're fighting it, just have a poker face. And then, of course, establishing those routines.
Great. We just have one more question that we'll get to. So my concern with transition is, with such a complicated illness, do you feel that it is important that a second set of ears be present at appointments? Spouses are welcome, but should parents be welcome during the transition time until the child has a partner?
That's a great question, and it's a loaded one, and it's an important one. So here's the challenge, and so my short answer is yes. I think that that it is complicated, and just like if if my young adult was at a CF appointment and the spouse or a good friend was there, the CF team probably wouldn't kick them out. But the CF teams are often more than ready and willing to not allow parents to come in. And so I see the dilemma from both sides, because here's the challenge, is that many parents cannot let go and take over in those appointments. And the CF teams, because I work with a lot of them, they see that. I mean, they see that, the parent can't be the fly on the wall and keep their mouth shut in the corner. Or just by the parent's very presence, just by them being there, the kid is defaulting over to the parent. They can see the eye glances when a question is asked. The patient doesn't even talk to the doctor. They look at the parent. So it's really a double-edged sword. We have to empower our kids to take responsibility and to jump in there and take care of themselves and take responsibility and answer the questions and talk directly with the doctors and take charge of it. We really need to empower that. And if they're leaning on us as a crutch or we're taking over, they can't do that. They can't do that. On the other hand, it's an absolutely valid point. Our kids need support. It's incredibly complicated, and they're learning. I mean, it's taken me 16 years to learn about CF, and I'm still learning every day. And so I am not sure of what the answers are. Maybe, if you can promise the CF team that you'll shut up and you'll sit in the corner like a fly and you won't say a word, and the first time you say something, they can kick you out. Maybe you can have agreements like that, as you try to work through it. But I wish I had an easy answer. It's a really, really tough dilemma. So thank you for that question. It's an important one.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for our webinar today. We'd like to send a big thank you to all of you for joining, and to Lisa for her wonderful presentation and her great insight into parenting children with CF. So thank you, Lisa.
As I'm reading through these. So thank you all. Thanks for being here. And thank you again so much for inviting me. And I look forward to connecting with you guys again online through Facebook or through a class.